Obviously excited to see you guys. Hadn't been able to talk to you guys since we made the move, but extremely excited about the opportunity that Keith presented, and obviously working for Coach Kiffin. Always excited to see new ways, different ways to do things. Obviously, there's a lot of ways in football to win football games. So I've been really impressed with Coach Kiffin, his leadership, and learned a lot from him this spring. So I'll go ahead and open it up for questions.
On y'all side of the ball is the most kind of turnover, a lot of new faces on that field, 1 through 11. Just what's the challenge just for you as a coordinator trying to get all that to mesh in such a short period of time?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing, having coached Division II, 1AA, and mid-major, very similar to high school. Like every year, you really don't know what you have. And instead of trying to, hey, here's the system and try to fit the players to a system, you really try to, okay, who do we have and what can they do? And then let's put them in those situations that they can excel in. So the hardest piece is when you bring in a lot of new guys, especially after spring ball, and then you don't have them in the summer as far as going through everything 11 on 11. As this fall camp's really important to them. And we got to take this first week, this scrimmage Saturday, to be really big, not just from a personnel standpoint, but more importantly, of all right, what can they do? And let's make sure what we're asking them to do, things that they can do, and not put them in situations that they're not ready for. And so I think that's a little tougher than normal because obviously a lot of guys that you even evaluate from a personnel standpoint last year on tape aren't here. And so number one is knowing their skill set, and then number two, their football intelligence of how much can they comprehend and how simple do we need to keep it based on their football intelligence. So it's tough, but that's what camp's for.
You're seeing him up close and personal every day. Just your initial thoughts. I know it's early of Perkins and what he brings to that position group early in his career.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I recruited him at the last place as well, and always knew he was a really gifted athlete. I had him ranked as the top linebacker in the country. Extremely explosive, really fast, got really good top-end speed, but his closing speed is really good. And I think it's a struggle for young players that haven't been in a college system, especially early, transitioning to being behind the ball, stacking. A lot of his high school tape was off the edge or apex and having to read and diagnose the box. And, the struggle for those guys is as you go through camp, you're installing a defense. It's a lot more than a game plan would be. And so obviously going into week one, you say, hey, here's our 4 calls that we're working when you're in the game and keep it pretty simple for him. But he's done really well. He loves football. He's a smart kid. He's very engaged. He takes good notes. So I think he has an extremely high ceiling. We're excited about him.
Earlier you briefly mentioned kind of the turnover, obviously, but when you first arrived here with the defensive players that were here, what were your kind of the initial impressions overall of the roster that you initially inherited before other pieces were eventually added?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing is when you first come into a place, like I didn't look at what they can't do. I try to take the guys that we have. They're our guys, and what position can we put those guys that are already on the roster to be able to have success in the SEC West? And so I thought there was obviously some talent up front. Thought we had some size. Thought we had some guys that had the ability to rush the passer. We needed to add more depth to that, which I think we did with the spring portal. Obviously, the back end was a little depleted from a number standpoint. Obviously, we had some guys that have skill that missed the spring, which I didn't get to see kind of firsthand yet, and then had them in the summer and fall camp, and a lot of those guys are stepping up. So, you take what you got, and you got to do the best you can with what you got, but we had guys on the current roster that are going to be able to help us win and play winning football.
Appreciate the time today, Pete.
Yes, sir.
I guess when a Pete Golding defense is playing really well, to the extent that you can, I mean, what are on a micro level, what is happening that's allowing that to be the case?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing in playing defense is, number one, you got to be able to play fast. So like kind of our motto on defense is fast, smart, and physical. And it's in that order because I don't care how physical you are. If you're not smart enough to be in the right place, it doesn't matter. And then I don't care how smart you are. If you're in the right place, you're not fast enough to tackle the guy with the ball, it doesn't matter. So number one, you got to get speed at all positions because, I mean, this is a game in space now, you know what I'm saying? And they're using the horizontal width of the field. So you got to get guys that can run and then guys that can process because, the difference between the college game and the NFL game is there's not unbalance in the NFL. There's not formation into the boundary in the NFL. Very few teams are going tempo in the NFL. So you combine all those things, and that can be in one play. So when guys are coming from high school and all those things, and they're not used to seeing that at the speed it is. And it's very easy to say, hey, let's keep it simple, which we're going to try to do. And then every time they line up in this, they know exactly what you're in, and they got coaches too, and they got good players too. So it's not always about having the chalk last, but it's them in the skies that make the same things look different and different things look the same so your guys can still play fast. And I think the big thing for us is not of a lot of our calls. all right, but just a few calls that we can line up, play assignment football, and be able to play fast.
Yeah, I know you can't mention specific recruits, but Alabama, you are obviously very successful recruiting, talented Mississippi players on defense, like a Brandon Turnage, Byron Young, Jaheim Otis, and all that. I know you have Mississippi ties yourself, but what kind of stands out just about, some of these recruits in the state of Mississippi? And just what do you feel like just kind of separates them apart?
Yeah, I think number one, to be honest with you, is the mentality. I think, having coached in Texas and recruited Texas and things like that, they're starting a real program so much earlier, right? And their facilities and the amount of staff and the resources that they have, a lot of those guys end up, reaching their ceiling earlier. And then you got some of these guys in rural Mississippi at certain programs that don't have a lot of staff, that don't have great weight programs, not because they're not good coaches, they just don't have the resources to do it. And when you get those guys with a high ceiling that aren't there yet, like they improve very quickly. And, I've always appreciated just South football, but Mississippi in general, because I think a lot of times you get a really raw athlete that loves football, and it's also appreciative. I think it goes a long way, that five-star syndrome, when they show up to this place, they appreciate the team room. They appreciate the gear they get. They appreciate the opportunity to play in the SEC, and they feel like they've got to earn it and keep it instead of it's given to them. And I think that mentality goes a long way, and I think it carries over to defense. That spot-the-ball mentality, put the ball down, we're going to play. I don't care if it's the parking lot, the playoffs, it doesn't matter. Right, it's just who we are, and I think a lot of guys, that's ingrained to them at an early age in this state.
Pete, at your last stop, you obviously had one of the premier pass rushers in college football in Will Anderson, one of the premier college defensive players. When you look at your defense and the way you want to run things, is there a guy on this team that you say, we need you to play that sort of role?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you compare them to a guy, obviously, from a coaching standpoint. I think systematically, based on their skill set, you try to put them in positions to have success. I think sometimes it's actually the opposite of that. And what I mean by that, when you have just a really elite pass rusher, number one, they know where he is at all times, right? Number two, as soon as you drop him or ask him to do something else, right, all y'all are saying, what an idiot, right? Well, why are we dropping the best pass rusher in the country? Well, because they're sliding to him every time and they're doubling him. All right, and we send two guys off the other edge, right? We got a guy come free. So a lot of times when you have that type of guy, you're trying to suit everything to him and put him in those positions, which the offense knows that too, right? They're going to game plan too. So I think when you have good football players on both sides, you're not as predictable, and what you're asking to do. And I think the morale within the room, everybody gets a little bit here and there, and I think it allows them to practice harder, prepare harder, because they know they're going to play. Now, don't get it twisted. I mean, it's great to have an elite player. I think we have some really good players. It wasn't like Will came in as a freshman like that. Coach Sal and those guys did a really good job developing him. And the biggest thing for him is his buy-in to the culture and to the system. And we've got a lot of guys similar mentality right now that are all in and want to do whatever they can for the guys in the room. And I think we'll have some guys step up in some of those roles this year.
Pete, John Sokoloff with WCBI. Nice to meet you.
Yes, sir. You too.
Oxford. Why did you ultimately end up deciding to kind of leave Alabama for Ole Miss? What was the kind of some of the bigger factors there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably similar to you guys' work too. Like, to me, having played Division II, right, and coaching Division II, like, my goal was always to coach in the SEC. And I think you get so locked in sometimes to a career, and you're focused on, all right, the next step, okay? And it was D2 for me, and then it was 1AA, and then it was mid-major, and then it was SEC, and then I want to be a coordinator in the SEC. And when you're married and you got 3 kids, I think sometimes you lose the value of what you're really about. And so, I mean, having won national championships, a lot of SEC championships and all that, I still wanted to go somewhere to where my family could be more involved, all right, number one. But number two, my wife graduated from Ole Miss. She was born and raised in Mississippi. My mom was born and raised in Mississippi. I played in Mississippi. This is my 3rd stint in Mississippi. And so when you can go somewhere that's already had success, that I think is very close to being, elite, year in and year out, and feel like you can have an impact to help that, especially on your side of the ball, while still being somewhere that your wife wants to be, that's always wanted to be, and still do what you love to do. I think that's special. I don't think it happens a lot. And I enjoyed where I was at. I learned a ton. It had nothing to do with Alabama. This was strictly based on trying to be a better husband and a better father.
And, obviously working with Nick Saban and now Lane, have you seen any kind of similarities between the two? Any differences? Anything to kind of point out there?
Yeah, no, a lot, to be honest with you, especially in a meeting format. Obviously, they're both super intelligent. They both demand discipline in the program in different ways, you know what I'm saying, but they still demand it. But a lot of the mannerisms are very similar within the room. I think what Coach Kiffin does a really good job of, I think it's very easy once you've been in that place for a long period of time to go somewhere else and try to run it exactly the same. And it's not. It's not the same resource. You don't have the same people. It's not in the same place. And so what I love about Coach Kiffin, a lot of the things that, helped Alabama get to where they are, we do. And there's some other things in every program, not just Alabama, that are probably in spite of, right? I mean, you're going to win in spite of doing those things. And I think Coach Kiffin does a really good job of putting his own personality on the program and still not getting away from the culture and the foundation and the discipline and the toughness and all those things that you need for a winning program, but still having his own personality to do it. And so I think, he and I both learned a lot from there.
On paper, defensive line feels like it's, kind of one of the deeper rooms, seasoned rooms with key returners. How have you seen them adjust and adapt, not specific X and O's, but just to that four-man front and through spring and early in camp here?
Yeah, I think number one, I think Randall Jordan does an extremely good job in that room. I think he does a good job from a recruiting standpoint. I think he does a better job from a development and creating culture in that room. So I think it's one of the better rooms, I think, especially on our side of the ball because who runs it. And I think we've brought in some good pieces to add to what was already here and a really good foundation up front of young guys that had experience, that love football, and that are very coachable. And so I think by far it is the deepest position. I think obviously we got experience in the room that were starters last year. I think we added some pieces, some more size, some more girth to be able to stop the run in this league. And then, be able to add a couple pass rushers off the edge depending upon who you play. And I think the biggest thing, obviously from a front structure standpoint that you kind of talked about, a lot of that's based on who you're playing, and what they're doing, what's the rhythm of the throws, So I know they were on, the previous coordinator, pretty good about the odd-man front, but a lot of those teams they were probably playing were quick rhythm, ball out, space, right, and you're wasting a guy. So, we're going to do whatever we need from a front structure and covers dictate on who we play. We're not going to go into it, hey, this is who we are. We're going to do what we need to do to win the football game. And so they've adapted well. I think some of them, what we're asking them to do is much more natural positionally for them than what they were asked to do before. But, yeah, we're going to do whatever it takes to win the football game.
Kind of going off of that, the back end of the defense, what do you feel like the evaluation is of, that area of the defense right now with safeties, quarters, of course, with John Saunders playing a little bit more safety in Tennessee and kind of moving up a little bit, kind of linebacker, all that. What do you feel like your evaluation is of that back end right now?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and this has kind of been my history anywhere I've been, in order to be able to play man-to-man, you got to have guys that have played man. And so we play with a 5 DB system normally in base down. So from a recruiting philosophy, we've always liked to recruit longer corners that maybe lack a little top-end speed for that position, but we bump inside. So there's going to be very few safeties that are going to be playing on our roster that didn't play corner, much less in high school, but more importantly probably in college. Because in this league, the matchup issues are primarily in the slot. And so if you don't have the ability to cover in the slot in this league, it's going to be a long night. And so if you got a double guys with a quarterback run game and being down a guy, it's really hard to stop people. So the number one we were trying to improve was the length, right, and speed ratio in the room to be able to have the ability to play man-to-man when you need to and then be able to mix that up. But I think the experience of the John Saunders of the world, the Dejon Anthonys, those were corners. They played corner where they were at, and they were starters, and they were good players, and now they're playing safety. So it's going to look like you got 4 to 5 corner body, long speed cover guys on the field that are still instinctive. So I think it's extremely important. I think Prince is playing really well right now. Obviously, I didn't get to see him in spring because of the injury. So I think we got 4 to 5 at corner that got size, that have speed, that also have position flexibility, and I think it helps the safety room.
Last one from me. You alluded to Centurion Perkins earlier. You and Lane were obviously down there in Hattiesburg when Centurion Perkins single-handedly won Raleigh a state championship. Do you kind of see that as just kind of a full circle type thing? And Lane talked about that particular game being one of the best games from a recruit he'd ever seen on film or in person and all that. What was your impressions of that?
Yeah, I think especially I haven't recruited a lot of guys and coaching football for a decent amount of time. I think, you always hear the term competitive greatness, and that to me is being at your best when your best is needed. And for the kid to show up at the biggest stage that he had been in up to that point, to not leave the field, whether it was offense, defense, or special teams, was pretty special. And then obviously, to end it with a ring on his finger, just kind of shows all his hard work, his dedication. That team coach does a really good job down there too. But that's the guy you want on your team. And regardless whether you're playing pickleball or basketball or football, you want that dude. You're picking him first. And so that's what I always loved about him. And on top of it, he had a great personality. So those are those 1-1 guys, right, from a culture and production standpoint that are pretty rare. And so we got to do a good job of putting him in the right place and keep it simple and let him be him.
Pete, what adjustments, if any, do you have to make playing with the fastest offense in the country and you're on the other side of the ball?
Well, it's a beautiful thing, to be honest with you. Now, you don't love doing it day one, you know what I'm saying? So especially when you got a bunch of new guys. But, the benefit is like we don't have to simulate it. So it's very hard when you start playing up-tempo teams in practice to be able to get a scout team to actually simulate the speed of that and still be able to execute. So it's been awesome going against Coach Kiffin and Coach Weiss every day, not only how multiple they are formationally, but the tempo that they play at. And it really allows your guys to have to focus, beat them to the ball, get their cleats in the turf, and execute. And it also makes you be a little more simpler on defense, which I think can help our guys, especially early, to get their cleats in the turf, see their key, and play fast. So, no, it's been really good. It's kind of a backwards approach to how old school ball was, hey, here it is, here's 2 back, here's 1 back, all right, and the progression of teaching a defense. But that's not football anymore. And so now it's very multiple. It happens fast, a lot of alternative formations. So the good thing about this is we see it every day. And nobody's going to do it faster and nobody's going to do it better. So hopefully we prepare for Saturday.
Pete, just from talking to some of the coaches down there, it sounds like you spent a ton of time in Raleigh, recruiting Suntarian.
A hell of a little chicken spot down there in the gas station.
I tried it. It was good. What's your relationship like with him? And then once everything was signed and, you knew you were coming here, he was coming here, did y'all have a little bit of a moment? Because it sounds like you've got a pretty tight relationship.
Yeah, obviously I think that was a very personal relationship. I'd actually, was trying to actually talk him into signing in February, right? Because I was still not talking to anyone, but, thought process of it is probably about time to make a move for my family. And so I was like, hey, look, just hold off, let's see, because I didn't want him to sign with Alabama and me not be there, right? And then I also didn't want to tell him to sign somewhere else and I not go there, so I was trying to kind of hold off. But, Ole Miss did a really good job in the recruitment process. They did a good job closing late. But it's just one of those things that, everything works out and God had a plan, and it was one of those things that kind of meant to be. But whether it's Git and Buck, yeah, we got a really good relationship. The coaches down there are awesome, so it worked out how it was supposed to. All right, appreciate it, guys.